understand it's your job, but you cannot seriously expect us to accept this huge pile right in the middle of the road.
It's temporary.
It started early one freezing morning, 6:12 a.m. That exact time is burned into my memory, because that's when it happened again. That sound. That harsh scraping noise of metal dragging across pavement. A snowplow. At first, it blended into the background. Just another winter morning, just another routine cleanup after a long night of snowfall. But something about it felt louder this time, closer, more aggressive. Like it wasn't just clearing the road, it was doing something more. I opened my eyes slowly, still half asleep, listening to the sound echo through the silence outside. The house was cold, quiet. That kind of heavy quiet you only feel during deep winter mornings. No cars, no people, just that one machine breaking the silence. I sat up, rubbed my eyes, and walked toward the window. And honestly, at that moment, I was actually relieved, because when it snows like that overnight, everything becomes harder. Getting out, driving, even walking to your mailbox feels like a mission. So yeah, seeing a snowplow usually means things are getting back to normal, but the second I pulled the curtain aside, that feeling disappeared, instantly. Because right there, at the end of my driveway, was a massive wall of snow. And I don't mean a small pile, I mean a thick, dense, heavy barrier. The kind that looks like it's been packed down with force, like it was pushed there deliberately. It stretched across the entire entrance of my driveway, blocking everything, completely. I just stood there, staring at it, trying to process what I was looking at. Because this wasn't just snow that had fallen. This was snow that had been moved, forced, stacked, almost like someone had built it there on purpose. My first thought was simple. Maybe it's just how the plow turned. You know, sometimes the angle pushes snow in weird ways. It happens. So I didn't react immediately. I just kept looking, taking it in, trying to stay calm. But then I noticed something else. Across the street, the HOA truck was still there, engine running, lights still on, not moving, not leaving, just sitting there. And for a moment, it felt like they were watching, like they were waiting to see my reaction. That's when the feeling changed. Confusion turned into suspicion, because deep down, I already knew something wasn't right. And the truth is, this wasn't the first time, not even close. This had been happening for weeks. Every single time it snowed, the same exact pattern. The plow would come through, clear the road perfectly, clean, smooth, professional. And then, right at the end, it would push all the snow straight onto my property. Not spread across both sides of the street, not shared evenly like you'd expect. No, just mine. Always mine. At first, I tried to ignore it. I told myself, it's probably nothing. Just bad positioning, wrong timing. Maybe I parked weird. I kept making excuses, because honestly, it's easier to believe it's accidental than intentional. But after the 5th time, then the 6th, then the 7th, it got harder to ignore, because patterns don't lie. And this was a pattern, a very clear one. And the more it happened, the more obvious it became. This wasn't random. This wasn't coincidence. This was targeted. And once that thought settled in, everything started to feel different. I began paying more attention, watching more closely, not just the snow, but everything around it, the timing, the routes, the way the plow slowed down near my property and sped up after. Little details, small things you wouldn't normally notice. But once you see them, you can't unsee them. And that's when I started connecting the dots. Because me and the HOA, we already had history. A few months before winter, there was an issue. Nothing major at first, just one of those typical HOA rules. Parking restrictions. The kind that don't always make sense. At least not to everyone. According to them, certain areas weren't allowed for parking anymore. But the problem was, that rule didn't even apply to my property, or at least it shouldn't have. So I questioned it, politely at first. I sent emails, asked for clarification, pointed out the inconsistency. But instead of getting clear answers, I got vague responses, avoidance, short replies, and eventually, attitude. So I pushed back, not aggressively, just firmly. Because if something doesn't make sense, why stay quiet? Why just accept it? And that's where things shifted. Because after that, their tone changed. Emails became colder, shorter, more formal, almost robotic, like they didn't want to engage anymore. And interactions in person, even worse, quick, awkward, avoidant, like I had crossed some invisible line. And now, standing there in front of that massive snow pile, it all started to make sense. Because this felt like payback. Not official, not written anywhere, but real and consistent. Snowstorm after snowstorm, they kept doing it, and I kept dealing with it every single time. I'd grab my shovel, layer up, step outside into the freezing air, and start clearing, slowly, carefully, because this wasn't light snow. It was heavy, wet, packed tight, the kind that sticks to everything, the kind that drains your energy fast. I'd clear a path, make progress, finally feel like I'm getting somewhere, and then the next storm would hit, and everything would reset, back to zero. Actually, worse than zero, because each time, the piles got bigger, higher.
Heavier, harder to move. It wasn't just physical anymore. It started affecting me mentally. Waking up became stressful. Every snowfall felt like a problem waiting to happen. Instead of enjoying winter, I started dreading it, because I already knew what was coming. More snow, more dumping, more work. And no explanation. That's what made it worse. No one ever said anything. No warning, no notice, no accountability. Just action. Silent, consistent, unfair. And one morning, standing there again, in the cold, looking at another massive pile blocking my driveway, something shifted. Not anger, not frustration, something deeper, clarity. Because in that moment, I realized something simple. This wasn't going to stop. Not on its own, not by waiting, not by hoping. If I kept reacting the same way, nothing would change. I'd just keep losing, over and over again. And that's when a different thought entered my mind. A quiet one, but powerful. What if I stopped fighting it? What if I used it instead? At first it sounded crazy, almost stupid. But the more I thought about it, the more it made sense. Because they controlled the dumping, but I controlled what happened after. And maybe, just maybe, that was enough. I didn't act on it immediately. I let the idea sit, grow, develop. Because something told me, this wasn't just frustration anymore. This was an opportunity. And deep down, I knew the next snowfall would be different.
I stopped fighting and started building. The breaking point came after the biggest storm of the entire season. The kind of storm people talk about for weeks. The kind that doesn't just cover the ground, it erases everything. That night, the snow didn't fall gently. It came down heavy, relentless, layer after layer, hour after hour. By morning, the world outside didn't look familiar anymore. It looked buried, completely. Roofs were covered, cars had disappeared under thick white blankets, the street was barely visible, even the sidewalks, gone. It was one of those rare moments where everything feels frozen in time, silent, heavy, still. No movement, no sound, just cold air and endless white. I remember opening my front door slowly and stepping outside. The cold hit instantly, sharp, biting, the kind that makes you take a deep breath whether you want to or not. And then I looked up and froze, because what I saw didn't even feel real. The HOA hadn't just dumped snow this time. They had buried my entire front yard. Not just the driveway, not just the entrance, everything. The pile stretched from one end of my property to the other. It spilled across my driveway, covered my walkway completely, reached all the way to parts of my fence, even climbed up near my porch steps. It looked less like a pile and more like a small hill, a thick, heavy, packed hill of snow. And in that moment, I didn't feel angry. I didn't feel frustrated. I didn't even feel surprised anymore. I just stood there. Quiet, still, processing it, because something inside me had changed. After weeks of dealing with the same thing, after constantly clearing, fixing, repeating, something shifted. It wasn't emotion anymore. It was clarity.
I took a slow breath, looked at that massive pile again, and thought to myself, all right, if this is how they want to play it, let's play. And that was the moment everything changed. Because instead of reacting the way I always had, I did something different. I didn't grab my shovel to remove the snow. I grabbed it to reshape it. At first, it felt strange, almost unnatural, like I was doing the opposite of what made sense. Anyone else would have started clearing a path, breaking it down, trying to get their space back. But not me. Not this time. This time, I stepped forward, drove the shovel into the pile, and started packing it down, slowly, deliberately, pressing the snow tighter, compressing it, shaping it, turning loose, messy piles into something more solid, more controlled. At first, progress was slow. The snow was heavy, wet, hard to move, but I stayed patient, focused, because I wasn't trying to rush anymore. I was building something, even if I didn't fully know what yet. I just kept going, stacking one layer on top of another, flattening surfaces, smoothing edges. And as I worked, that random pile started changing. It started taking form, not by accident, but by intention. And then, that idea came back, stronger this time, clearer. What if I don't just shape it? What if I lock it in place? That night, the temperature dropped even lower, way below freezing. Perfect conditions. So I grabbed a hose, pulled it outside, and started spraying water over the snow, lightly at first, then more evenly, layer by layer, letting it soak into the surface, knowing what would happen next. Because when water meets freezing air, it hardens, it solidifies, it transforms. And by morning, that's exactly what happened. I stepped outside again, walked up to the structure, and tapped it with the shovel. Solid. Not soft snow anymore. Not loose or fragile.
This was different. This was strong. And in that moment, I knew. This wasn't just an idea anymore. This was a plan, and I committed to it fully. From that day on, everything changed. Every time the HOA dumped more snow onto my property, I didn't complain. I didn't react. I used it carefully, strategically. I'd step outside after each snowfall and go straight to work, packing, stacking, freezing, layer by layer, day after day, storm after storm. The structure grew, slowly at first, then faster, because now I understood the process, where to add, where to reinforce, where to thicken. What started as a pile became a ridge, then a barrier, then something more defined, a long, continuous line running along the edge of my property, separating my space from the street. And as the days passed, that line got taller, wider, stronger, until eventually, it wasn't just a barrier anymore. It was a wall, a real one, thick, solid, unmovable. And the best part? I didn't bring in anything extra. No materials, no outside help. Everything came from them. Every inch of that wall was built from the snow they dumped. And for the first time all winter, I wasn't on the losing side anymore. I was in control. And people started noticing. Neighbors slowed down when passing by. Some stared. Some laughed. Some didn't understand what they were looking at. But a few, they got it. One afternoon, a guy stopped his car right in front of my house, rolled down his window, looked at the wall, then looked at me and said, You didn't just deal with it. You turned it into something. I smiled, because that's exactly what I had done. I didn't fight the problem. I transformed it. But of course, it didn't take long for the HOA to notice. They always do. A few days later, that letter arrived. Official, stamped, cold, predictable.
Violation notice. I opened it slowly, already knowing what it would say. They claimed my wall was unsafe, that it blocked visibility, that it interfered with traffic flow. And according to them, it had to be removed immediately, or I'd face fines, penalties, further action. I read it once, then again, and honestly, I almost laughed, because suddenly, they cared about safety? After weeks of dumping snow onto my property? After blocking my driveway over and over again? Now it was a problem? No, I wasn't buying it, and I wasn't backing down. Because this wasn't just about snow anymore. It wasn't even about the wall. It was about something bigger. Respect, fairness, standing your ground. I folded the letter, set it aside, and made a decision. I wasn't taking it down. Not now. Not like this. Because deep down, I knew something they didn't. The real test hadn't happened yet. And when it did, everything would change.
Part 3. The day everything stopped. A few days later, the storm came back. Heavy snow, strong winds. The kind of storm that makes everything harder. The kind that usually meant one thing for me. More problems. More snow dumped onto my property. More frustration waiting in the morning. But this time, it felt different. I wasn't stressed. I wasn't annoyed. I was calm. Because for the first time all winter, I was ready. I stood by my window that morning, watching the snow fall, watching the streets slowly disappear under thick layers of light. And deep down, I knew exactly what was coming next. Right on schedule, that familiar sound returned. The scraping noise of the HOA plow, getting closer, louder, breaking through the silence. I didn't rush outside. I didn't react. I just stood there, watching, waiting, because this time, I wanted to see what would happen. The truck slowly came into view, blade down, pushing snow forward as it moved down the street. Everything looked normal, exactly like every other time. Same speed, same pattern, same direction. And then, it reached my property. The driver angled the blade, pushing the snow toward my side, toward my property, toward the wall. And then, impact. A solid, heavy stop. The blade hit the wall and didn't move. The truck jerked slightly. The driver paused, then tried again, adjusted the angle, pushed harder, but nothing changed. The wall held, strong, unshaken. He tried one more time, more force, more pressure, still nothing. And that's when things started going wrong, because the snow had nowhere to go. Instead of moving onto my property, it started piling up in the street, right there, in the middle. At first it was small, but within minutes it grew, thicker, wider, blocking more of the road. Cars began approaching, slowing down, drivers confused. Then one car stopped, then another, and another.
Within minutes, traffic backed up. People started stepping out of their cars, looking around, trying to figure out what was happening. Some pointed toward the wall, others toward the plow. Frustration started building, and the HOA, they had no control over it. For the first time, they were stuck, just like I had been all winter. I watched for a moment longer, then stepped outside. The cold air hit instantly, but I didn't mind, because this time, I wasn't stepping out to fix anything. I was just watching, quiet, calm, letting everything unfold. The driver stepped out of the truck, looked at the wall, then at the snow building up behind him, then back at the wall again, like he couldn't believe it. And honestly, that was the point. Because this wasn't random. This wasn't luck. This was built, layer by layer, from everything they had dumped. And now, they were facing it. Then the confrontation came. HOA management showed up, clearly upset, walking fast through the snow, straight toward me. "What is this?" one of them asked. I looked at him calmly and said, "It's your snow." He didn't like that. "You need to remove this immediately. This is blocking the street." I nodded slightly, then pointed behind me, toward my property. "You've been dumping snow here all winter." He tried to argue, talk about rules, violations, fines, legal action, all of it. But I didn't argue back. I didn't raise my voice. I just said one thing. "You filled it, I used it." And that was it. Because deep down, they knew everything in that wall came from them. Every layer, every block, every frozen inch. They created it. I just shaped it. And there was nothing they could say to change that. After that day, everything changed. The snow dumping stopped completely. No more piles in my driveway, no more blocked walkways, no more targeting. The plow still came. The road still got cleared.
But now, it was done properly, evenly, fairly, like it should have been from the beginning. And just like that, the problem disappeared. As winter slowly faded, the snow began to melt. Day by day, layer by layer, the wall slowly disappeared, until one day, it was gone. But the message, that stayed. Because sometimes, you don't win by fighting harder. You don't win by arguing louder. You win by thinking smarter, by using what you have and turning it into something they can't ignore. So if you were in my place, what would you have done? Let me know in the comments. And if you enjoyed this story, make sure to like, subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one. ARC.